Hot water is one of the biggest energy users in Kiwi homes, and heat pumps are changing the game. We sat down with Gareth Gretton from EECA about why hot water heat pumps are a smart solution and what electricians need to know as demand grows. Gareth, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We're chatting hot water heat pumps. Do you want to start off by telling me a little bit about why they're such an important part of New Zealand's energy strategy?
Great question. So we estimate that about a third of energy consumption for households goes into hot water. So probably a bit more than people think. We often have this focus on space heating, but especially with more modern housing these days, then probably water heating is starting to be the biggest use of energy. And that would be especially true for larger households. I think the simple reason for why it's such a big opportunity is because it is one of the largest sources of energy use within households. And it's also a single appliance that needs to be replaced from time to time. So with heating, of course, there's often a diversity of appliances through the house, but with water heating, one appliance, biggest chunk of energy use in your household. So make the right decision on choosing an efficient one, and that's going to be saving you energy going forwards.
So what makes hot water heat pumps so much more efficient?
Well, they're using the same technology as the heat pumps for heating our homes that we're all familiar with. So essentially, rather than making new heat by burning a fuel or by using electricity in an element in a traditional electric hot water cylinder, you're effectively sucking heat out of the outdoor air and pushing that heat into the water. So it's that ability to take heat that already exists. Even when it's below zero outside, there's still heat in the outside air. So it's about taking that heat and putting it into the water. And that's really where the efficiency comes from.
Are there any common challenges that electricians need to be aware of when it comes to installing these systems?
I suppose it's partly where you get into the plumbing realm. So these things are going to need plumbed in. And depending on the specific type of hot water heat pump, there could also be a requirement for some refrigeration work. Just to talk a little bit about the different types, essentially you can have an all-in-one. That means that there's a cylinder that's going to go outside your house, and it's effectively got a heat pump built into the top of it. So just one big, long vertical cylinder. And that doesn't then require any refrigeration work. You just bring it to site, plumb it in, wire it in, done. Other models, there could be refrigeration work required to connect an indoor cylinder to an outdoor heat pump unit, in which case the outdoor heat pump unit would look more or less the same as the ones that we're all familiar with for space heating. And then there's other models again where the connection between the outdoor unit and the indoor cylinder is through water, essentially. So with that one, no refrigeration, but a bit more plumbing.
And getting around those sort of challenges, is it just about seeking some extra advice from different areas of people that have expertise in that area?
Yeah, I think probably talking to colleagues as well. So hot water heat pumps are relatively new in terms of mass adoption. Been around for quite a while, but the uptake has been relatively slow thus far. But I think in the last few years, they've really been moving on in terms of the efficiency and also in terms of the price point coming down. So at the moment in New Zealand, we estimate that there's probably between about 1,000 and 2,000 of them in houses, but that's growing very rapidly. And also just by way of example, if you look over to Australia, I think they're installing, tens of thousands of them every single year, and there's over 100,000 of them. Wow. So even when you sort of adjust for the fact that New Zealand is obviously smaller than Australia, the rate of adoption over there is much, much faster.
Why do you think that is?
Well, the simple answer for that is because there has been more of a subsidy program in Australia, which has been bringing down the price for consumers. I think there probably is also just that element of familiarity. So for a lot of people in New Zealand, a hot water heat pump might be what's one of those. We've become very familiar with space heating heat pumps in a short period of time, but hot water heat pumps are the new thing. So until you've probably seen one, until your neighbour's got one, until your friend's got one, maybe you're just not so convinced. So I think for electricians, maybe part of the learning is just trying to reach out across their professional networks and talk to people that have installed them and maybe get some lived experience.
So how do they work with other tech to optimize the household's energy use?
So I guess much like an electric hot water cylinder, there is the opportunity to use timers or other smart controls to sort of maximize the value. So that basically means that you look at how you pay for electricity, you look at how that varies in at different times of day, and you basically schedule your heat pump to come on when the price of electricity is lower. So that's a little bit like the ripple control that people might be familiar with, but using different control mechanisms.
Do you have any real world examples or data that shows how effective they've been in Kiwi homes?
We've got a lot of anecdotal data at the moment, and we've got a lot of test lab data, and quite pleased to say that we'll be filling in the gap in terms of real world observed data over the next year with a project that EECA is running to do exactly that, because anecdotes are one thing and test labs are another thing, but actually having the real life data is pretty important. But what we do know from other things is that the tests that we do use, which are regulated tests, are very rigorous and are very robust and do give us representative answers for real world circumstances. So it's not a gap that we're really concerned about what the outcome is going to be. It's a gap that we very much expect to confirm the data that we've already got. But obviously it's always good to make sure of that.
You mentioned Australia briefly before. I'm just wondering, can you look to countries like Australia and see how things are working over there for them to compare or as examples?
We certainly always do that in New Zealand. It's always good to see what mistakes might be made in other countries, not necessarily Australia. And that's the advantage of just being a little bit behind sometimes, is if you can sort of sidestep those mistakes.
When it comes to actually installing and wiring these systems, are you seeing any common mistakes that electricians are making?
Probably one of the things to be careful about is ripple control. So you could in principle connect a hot water heat pump to a ripple controller, but the problem with that is that it would probably end up resetting the controller every time the ripple kicked in. So I think it's really about understanding, how it should be wired up. And that's especially true if we get into solar. So some hot water heat pumps can have smart controls which allow them to sort of effectively talk to what's happening with the solar output and therefore sort of turn themselves on and off according to that. So it's really about understanding how a hot water heat pump integrates with the electrical system in the house to make sure that it all works properly.
And how can electricians use this tech as, I guess, like a key talking point or a conversation that they can have with clients about when they're looking at the household's energy efficiency?
Yeah, I think it's about that bigger picture. So if you've come in to do maybe a small job like replacing some downlights or putting in a new plug point or whatever else it is, and the householder might start to ask about, what other sort of things could I do? It's about maybe looking at the bigger picture of all the different appliances that a household has. So the big three that we look at are really space heating, water heating, and cooking. And specifically the reason for those is because those are the things that could be either gas or electricity. And with electric appliances, they are much more efficient. So electric appliances are always more efficient, especially when you get into technologies like heat pumps, where the efficiency is 3 or 4 times what other things are. So it's about really thinking ahead about how that household that you might have just come into to do a small job can actually look ahead about what they could do in 1, 2, 4, 5 years time, whatever it is.
And then do you see that being something that helps electricians maybe stand out as well with their clients?
I think so, because householders are always looking for trusted advice. They're looking for things to be demystified. They probably like, talking to people who've got some lived experience, who can recommend things that have worked for other people. So I think that really is the opportunity for that trusted advice.
When it comes to increasing the uptake, do you think there needs to be a bit more work around the awareness as well to start with before we even get to the action? Or is there something that you can see we could do now that helps move into the action a bit quicker?
I think it's about understanding the opportunities, the benefits, so that when the time comes to replace a hot water heater, you're not making a spur of the moment decision. So what we know is that hot water heaters are often replaced at end of life. It's a common thing in households. You wait for something to break before you replace it. Problem with that, of course, is that it's then replaced in a hurry. And it often means that you're searching around for what's available in your local distributor. And that means that you're often not able to get hold of the most efficient technology. So it's really about having a bit of a plan, being aware of what the different options are, and potentially replacing something proactively rather than waiting for it to break.
You mentioned earlier some of the challenges that electricians face when it comes to installing these systems. Is there any training or anything that you're aware of coming up that'll help them get up to speed?
Yes, so EECA and Master Electricians are both doing some work in this area, recognizing the need for that training. So EECA is developing something similar to what some electricians might be familiar with for space heating heat pumps. So EECA has had some advice for a number of years about a best practice guide for installing space heating heat pumps. We're doing the same thing right at the moment for hot water heat pumps. So that should be available in the near future. And then similarly with Master Electricians, they're also developing some trade training specifically for hot water heat pumps. So I guess stay tuned is the message on that one.
If you could give one message then to electricians across New Zealand, or one key thing that you'd want them to know about hot water heat pumps, what would that be?
I think it's probably the efficiency and the opportunity. So going back to the sort of statistic around it being about a third of a household's energy use, in some ways it represents the biggest opportunity for reducing electricity consumption. There are also some amazing back of the envelope calculations that really show the opportunity on a national scale. So one of the concerns that sometimes gets raised is, how is our grid going to cope with all these new electric vehicles that people are proposing to bring in? Well, if you actually look at bringing in hot water heat pumps alongside an electric vehicle, then you can basically keep your household electricity demand at about the same level, which I think is just really quite astonishing. When you think of just how far you can drive in an electric car for the electricity you can save by switching to a hot water heat pump. I think it takes a little bit of wrapping your head around the scale of the opportunity there, because the numbers almost don't quite seem to match up. But it's a calculation that I've done probably about 10 times now just to make sure I got it right.
Just to double check,
because the numbers are astonishing, really.
Yeah.
So I think that's the opportunity for households, but also for the country as a whole through the efficiency of hot water heat pumps.
That one small thing that can actually make quite a significant difference.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your insight today. It's been lovely to chat.
Lovely chat. Thank you.